Hey everybody, you're listening to the BTW Media Podcast, the show that explores the stories, innovations, and insights for people who love technology and the internet. Today we explore the telecommunications industry with insights from Michael Lim, CEO of Nexthop and Anticlockwise. We'll discuss trends like internet commoditization, the impact of hyperscalers, and the growing demand for the fibre. Michael also touches on the evolving geopolitical landscape, technological advancement like Starlink and 5G, and Australia's leading role in tech innovation. Join us to understand these shifts and their implication for the future of telecommunications. Nice to meet you, Michael Lim. As the leader of Nexthop and Anticlockwise, how do you view the current trends in the telecommunication industry?
Trends in the telecommunication industry, it's busy. There's lots of noise. There's lots of change and consolidation in the space, like heaps of M&A activity. It feels like there's some disruption going on, and it's players like us that are sort of party to that disruption and the beneficiaries of it. You know, there's been a commoditization of, I guess, the internet that happened quite a while ago, but it's also happening to the infra side of things as well. It's a good and a bad thing. It's good if you own the infrastructure, you're not relying on other people. I think it's quite challenging if you're in the game of being an RSP and leveraging other people's infrastructure. That's why you can see some of the serious RSPs have invested in building their own fibre footprints and stuff. Like people like Aussie Broadband do that, for example.
What exactly do you mean by the inflection point the industry is experiencing? Because I saw this kind of concept you posting on LinkedIn. Can you just simply introduce to us?
When I was talking about the inflection point, that was a couple of years ago at a Comms Day event, which was a great event. And what I was describing there or discussing was the way the hyperscalers have changed, I guess, the demand for services, for tech. They've changed the way the internet behaves. They're effectively controlling the international networks these days, right? So there was a time where, and I came from that background in the subsea cable world. I used to work for Telecom, which became PacNet, which then got purchased by Telstra. There was a time when the carriers, just off organic traffic, could demonstrate a case to build cable systems and sell lots of capacity and everything else. It's probably about 10 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer even. The hyperscalers, so the OTT players like your Facebooks, your Googles and Microsoft and everyone else, Amazon, started to procure pairs and co-invest on the subsea networks. Thing was, they did that, and the hyperscalers also, I won't say the owners of the content, but that's where all the organic traffic was coming from. And suddenly they've brought all the traffic into the region themselves, which means that unless you've got tremendous scale of organic traffic demand, I guess the investment calculus for subsea has probably changed quite a bit in the last few years, especially. I think it's challenging. So that's part of what I'm talking about when I say inflection point, right? The other thing is what we've seen as an ISP is our traffic profiles have dramatically shifted in, say, 10 years. So we first launched B2B ISP brand, Anticlockwise, back in 2013, 2012. So it launched as an ISP in 2012. The company actually goes back to 2004. It used to be a web hosting, web development company. I guess what we've seen is traffic flows have gone from this mix of international, different websites, different CDNs and everything else, and a lot of IP transit demand to this state where we're at right now, where the bulk of the traffic is coming into us from like entering and exiting the network through Microsoft, through Amazon, through Google, the big content or OTTs, Facebook, Meta, these sorts of guys. And it's only going upwards to the point now, we're at the point where I'm seeing traffic utilization from international locations is down to like below 10%. It used to be 50, 70%. I remember in the PacNet days, it was like 75% or something from the US, and it's completely changed. And that's changed just because these big guys are bringing the capacity into country themselves. That's part of the inflection point story, right? So the internet is fundamentally changing. The geopolitics of it is changing as well. You can kind of see how, I'm not sure which regulatory arm it is in the US, but it might be the FCC or some sort of national security division. They don't seem to allow connectivity directly anymore with new cables between the US and certain nations that they probably don't have a great relationship at the moment, or there's a diplomatic concern. You can see with things going into PRC and stuff like that. The sense I have, I don't know how accurate this is, but the sense I have now is that they're trying to create almost two internets. So that's kind of weird spot that we're in right now. And you can't, at our scale especially, do anything to change the geopolitics of the situation. You know, we're about to enter a new election cycle we're in a new election cycle in the US. You really saw the China relationship deteriorate between the US and China after probably 2020, thereabouts. Before 2020. It was during the Trump tenure anyway. Yeah, so he was 2016 to 2020, yeah. That's when the tariffs came in, you know, they had the Trump tax. Like we saw our equipment that was being manufactured in PRC had another levy attached to it to cover these taxes. And then, you know, you see other things getting affected, like even cost of wine and everything else. But where I'm going with this is it's uncertain and things are changing there. It's changing the international capacity demands. Everything's changing. Meanwhile, in the domestic front, hyperscalers are starting to buy. They've always bought a lot of capacity. You have a look in, you know, Virginia and areas like that in the US where they were buying copious amounts of dark fibre to interconnect their facilities. I think there's a bit of a move happening in Asia Pac to do similar deployments at scale. I think the capacity demands are a little bit different and technology's changing as well. You can get a lot more data down a pair of fibre these days than you could 10 years ago, right? And that's just growing. You know, we're in the 800 gig wave territory now, so that's a lot of capacity. And then you can have multiple waves down a fibre and yeah, you get it. So yeah, the demand, I guess the supply-demand calculus is changing is where I'm going with that. And that's the inflection point, right? Like the infra is becoming quite valuable and in demand. And it's a bit like if you're an infra provider with fibre assets, you don't have the same commercial opportunities as a hyperscaler, obviously, but your monetization is really the services or supplying services to meet some of their demands. There's an opportunity there if you've got infrastructure. And it's something that's been evolving now in Australia for probably the last 4 years. And it seems to be increasing. Recently, a Sydney-based player just announced a big win down in Melbourne. They were talking about 250 kilometres of conduits being deployed in Melbourne. That's yet another network doing that. There's multiple that are overbuilding each other there, which will probably lead on to one of the next points you're asking here about technical challenges. So protecting the assets is becoming problematic now just because of the amount of construction. The construction demand is being driven by the hyperscalers. They're deploying multiple data centres and they're all doing it. Like you can see it happening. There's multiple news articles about them and their land acquisitions and where they're building. So they're acquiring land, building data centres, and they need all these conduits to interconnect them so they can run fibre in the conduits. That construction process in itself is creating some real operational headaches for carriers. I know we've seen a few instances where our network's been damaged. I think we just recently completed a 100 kilometre conduit rollout. Look, during that time, we got pretty lucky in that we were going through uncongested areas. There was minimal, we didn't have any telco strikes. We never took down another telco, I was pretty happy with that outcome. I think we had really good partners working on the deployment. But you could see that some of the areas are getting a bit congested, especially in around Macquarie Park, which is one of the data centre precincts of Sydney. There's not much room, and I'm seeing now people are starting to fight for space to run conduits. And some of the contractors are coming in from out of state. I think they're taking some risks that are a bit, they're making decisions which I view as risky. Recently, there was a asset strike down in, by strike I mean somebody ran a drill through some conduits in Mascot and took down a bunch of networks. I didn't make the news for some reason, but it was bad. Like I could see it. Lots of people were talking about it. And that just goes back to this model. They're building for an operator who's supplying hyperscalers with capacity. And they've taken a risk and drilled. And as there's more and more development, because that development hasn't stopped yet, not for Sydney, there's going to be more of these incidents occurring. So the challenge, the operational challenge is trying to find space under the roads, under the footpaths, and then trying to deploy without interrupting other services. It's complicated. But that's a very Australian-centric problem, by the way, or even a capital city-centric problem. Like once you go out into the regions, obviously, it's not such a concern.
In terms of your experience so far, how would you compare technology and innovation in Australia to other countries?
Australia's technology innovation, we're actually pretty solid in Australia for innovation. Yeah, like Australia's good. I do a little bit of travel these days and I talk to players around the world, and I think the consensus seems to be Australia's a bit of a test bed for Asia Pac. Like it's considered a friendly, like US tech firms can launch here and test and develop platforms for overseas. We're either the leader or definitely the leader in Asia or Asia Pac. Globally, we're also one of the leaders in cloud adoption in enterprise and government. Like we've really jumped on board that bandwagon. So I think Australia's doing pretty well. We're doing pretty well. You can see that at a government level, like fairly recently, it was under the previous state administration, state government. They made quite a big suite of improvements in I guess, digitalising the customer interface with various levels of like the road and traffic or the RMS, Road Maritime Services or something. It's where you get your driver's licenses and do rego renewals and all of that, to a situation where everything was done online. You know, you can get electronic driver's licenses and all this. So there's some good innovation happening. And when you can see a country, as small as we are, where the government, which is probably the slowest moving of any area of a country, it's usually the governments that move the slowest, and they're going down that digitalisation, it sort of speaks to the country being quite forward-looking in that regard, which is good.
What changes have you observed in the supply and demand for the fibre optic networks?
Changes. So what changes have I observed in supply and demand for fibre? So I think I covered that before, but the demand is increasing, right? The demand is, businesses don't come out there and talk about buying dark fibre or anything like that. They don't care. The only ones that care about that are probably the hyperscalers. Businesses are buying services, right? And it happens to be that the types of services that they want, like high bandwidth internet and everything else, needs to be driven over fibre. It's the only technology that exists that will give them what they want right now. And the demand is steadily increasing. You know, the flip side of that is there's probably an oversupply. There's quite a lot of fibre out there, and there seems to be more and more entrants to the market, you know, building and overbuilding each other. That's quite interesting. I think the market's going to favour the people that can be a one-stop shop. You need to be able to deliver the internet services, the layer 2 services, over the fibre to really provide a good value proposition. So I think, look, people have some different and diverse takes on this, but that's mine, and that's our vision. I think you need to be able to do everything. You can't limit yourself to just the one technology, and we'll see how things play out in the fullness of time.
What are the predictions for innovation and development of fiber optic network infrastructure in the next 5 years? Since you have more say in the industry, I'd like to hear your opinion.
Innovations and developments in the fibre optic network. It's hard to say. I think there might be some movements in the hollow core fibre space, but you know, there was an announcement about maybe 18 months ago, 12 months ago, something like that, where Microsoft purchased a hollow core fibre company. Who knows what that's for, but there's some space in the industry to improve performance and that. But everything that we're talking about is quite incremental in terms of the improvements. There's no radical change that I can see on the horizon that will just completely shift things. I think the radical changes are happening outside of the fibre optic space. Fibre optic improvements are generally about getting better bang for your buck, you know, better density, so more services down a single pair of fibres or a single fibre, right? That's where the improvements seem to be, and it's very incremental. But where the big shifts are happening in the space, in technology or connectivity more broadly, is probably in the wireless and satellite space. So Starlink is really interesting. You know, the other LEO operators are really interesting. Starlink's got a massive head start on everyone else by the looks of it, and that's become, you know, the go-to technology in regional Australia. I mean, you look at Australia, I forget what the percentage is of the population that lives in urban centres, but it's huge. Like, we're very much coastal city creatures as a country, as a nation. But there are still there's people who live in the, you know, in the rural areas, and they were meant to be serviced by the national broadband network. For whatever reason, many of these people have started to shift their connectivity over to Starlink. And I think that's quite a big change. And it's happened more quickly than I'd anticipated. And it's a good thing. It's a good service. You know, I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's actually innovation, right? Next thing they're talking about, you know, mobile calls directly to the LEO satellites and everything else, and data to mobile. So there's a lot of stuff happening in that space. It's really cool. 5G, like an incremental improvement over 4G. And it's got its own physical challenges. I don't think it's the revolution that it was sold to us as by futurists a couple of years back, but it's a necessary evolution in tech.
How do you think Nexthop's market positioning will change in the next coming years?
Our market positioning will change in the coming years. You know, obviously we're steadily growing. We are winning more and more deals as, you know, time progresses. We're dealing with bigger and bigger clients as well, which is pretty exciting. We've been working in that hyperscale space for, 18 odd months now, just a bit over a year, when we started to engage with them. And there seems to be incrementally some more demand in that space as well. And obviously you need to try and win those things. They can be transformative deals, right? But putting that to the side, we're seeing a lot more growth in our enterprise and wholesale spaces, where people are buying wholesale services from us, buying a lot more fibre-based services from us, but they're not buying fibre on its own. Remember I mentioned this before, right? Like, they're buying a service. So what's happening is people are coming saying, hey, I want internet, I want this, I want these types of services delivered to these premises in the city, and that's how we deliver it on our fibre network, right? So I think our position will change. There's a lot of fibre operators, don't get me wrong, but I guess doing what we're doing, there's not that many players. We're very unique in the market. You know, we're the only one that's not PE backed, or, you know, backed by really complicated shareholder structures and everything else. We're a very simple organisation. We're still founder-led. So we're unique in the space. And I guess we've been laser focused on, deploying capital in a sensible fashion because we've always spent our own money. Like we bootstrapped the company, right? It was bootstrapped out of our Anticlockwise and Barnet retail service provider businesses. And that's what led to the infrastructure investment and everything else. And we want to continue doing that. But, at some point there'll be discussions had with other counterparties to try and work out how we can accelerate growth. Because what we've done is spent the last, I think 2018 was when we really kicked off the plans for fibre and just built to organic demand from then on. But what we've done is proven that the platform works, that the business case stacks up, that it's got organic growth, there's a bit of a buzz. We try to stay close with our clientele. David and I, so David's the co-founder of the business, David Brown. We're very involved in the company still. I like to meet the clients, and regardless of how things play out in the fullness of time, one of my personal aims is to stay close with the clients always. There's no client too big or too small for me to go and talk to and, front up when there's a problem and maintain that approach to the business moving forward. As long as we can keep growing at the present rate, I'll be quite happy. There's some opportunities out there for us. They're quite confidential, so I can't talk about it, but not in detail, but watch this space. I'm expecting some pretty big moves by us in the not so distant future.
Thank you, Michael. You give us a lot of insight of the technological industry, and I hadn't thought of it before, and thank you for your time. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode.